Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Infragistics and OpenFin and how you can use some of our Infragistics products to build really interesting things on the OpenFin platform. Now, the nice and interesting thing about OpenFin is that you can take a web application and essentially host it within a Windows application so that you can take what would traditionally have been a web application and give it greater privileges on your system than it would have otherwise. The upshot of this is that this enables interesting scenarios whereby you can have individual windows communicate with each other or spawn child windows. You can spawn other applications or call other external applications. You can essentially communicate in many ways locally on your system rather than needing to reach out to a remote website and have that send push notifications down to other applications running on your system. It achieves this essentially by in the container around your web application, letting you call out using their JavaScript APIs to talk to various communication channels local to your system to communicate with other processes. OpenFin also provides APIs for WPF and Java for letting you write applications using non-web technologies and have them communicate with your web applications. I'm going to show you some interesting demos that can show you how that might be a useful thing to you. So I'm going to start up this web application here, which I'm just hosting locally. Now, this by default will open up in a browser here, and you can see the application running as a full web application in the browser. What you can see here is that it's simulating some stock data over time. I can change the chart type between various different types of chart. Here's a candlestick chart here, and we're simulating adding additional new data at the end of the chart and letting you zoom and scroll around in it. The interesting thing though might be, what if you want to have many different windows open with many different views of the data, or show some related data alongside your data. And traditionally, this would be a bit difficult with a web application. You might have to communicate with a remote server and send communications through that server as a relay between your different windows or different browsers that you might have open on different windows. But let's see what we can do with OpenFin. So I'm going to close this browser down, and instead I've pre-set up an installer and a shortcut so that this application is installed via the OpenFin platform as well. So if I just launch this shortcut, it should open up that same web application as a OpenFin application. And so you can see essentially the same view that we had here. I can change the chart type to candlestick, and let's see where we can take it from there. So before I move on, this is sort of an interesting view here where we actually have several different charts that are all coordinated with each other, and a zoom bar down here that's showing you your global position. That's again synchronized with these others, and these are all interesting features that are built into this visualization. Our data chart provides you a way of saying, hey, I would just like to synchronize the various views of these charts with each other, and then it keeps that all in sync. So if I were to click on one of these prices here, then there's an interesting thing here where we've been able to spawn a separate window and open up a grid in that window. And this grid is showing you the historical data that is bound to the chart over there. And if I select a row here, we can see that the selection has been synchronized between the two windows. So when I select one in one, it selects the same data in the other. So if I select this, what you can see is that we've panned across. We've been able to pan across to the appropriate point, and it keeps it in view. Now, this is sort of showing a very traditional financial application where we're tracking some stocks with some technical analysis, and we want to look at the data in multiple different ways. So that's interesting there, but let's see how far we can push some of the underlying tech that OpenFin is providing here. First, let me give you a little bit of a window into how easy some of that was to configure there. If we punch down into the application here, I'm just going to search for publish here. So when we are clicking on this is an event that's hooked up to the chart there, and it's just essentially telling us which item was clicked on. And in order to make that same item be selected in the grid, all we've had to do is to essentially publish an event saying that, hey, the price selection has changed on the OpenFin inter-application bus, and that essentially allows the grid to know which price has been selected in the chart. And meanwhile, if we look at the grid, and I search for publish here, then down in the grid's configuration here, we have an event bound to row selection changing. And so whenever I change the selected row in the grid, I'm able to, again, just publish the same event on the inter-application bus for OpenFin. And the chart is able to react and show that that item is selected, which is all quite neat. There's an equivalent set of things going on here where we're periodically injecting some new data into the charts there. And here we can see how we are just notifying the charts that we've modified the data that's assigned to them, and they're reacting accordingly. And then we just need to essentially, up here as well, and then we essentially need to send a message on the inter-application bus that, hey, there's a new price that's been added, and shoot that over the wire to the other window. So that is essentially the demo that I can show you there. You'll notice that when I closed the window containing the chart there, it also closed the window with the grid, and that's because we used OpenFin to spawn the grid as a child window to the chart window there, and resultingly the charts window owned that window, and they both closed. Now let's look at some other interesting tech demonstrations that aren't necessarily related directly to the financial vertical, but do give you an interesting idea as to what other things might be possible in terms of combining our components with the OpenFin platform. Okay, to continue, if we first stop the application here, what I will do is just go ahead and close that out. And then I have another application to show here, to show a bunch of more technical demos to to show off some other capabilities here. This is an example of essentially updating a chart with high frequency. What this is doing is reading the CPU levels of the system and the memory levels of the system. Actually, specifically, it's talking to the OpenFin APIs for doing so, which mainly focus on getting the CPU and memory levels of all the OpenFin windows that you have open on your system. Normally, and we can see we've got a frame rate up there. Normally that's a lot higher, but I am recording my screen at the moment, which is taking a substantial amount of system resources to do. And you can see here I'm actually using my fingers to zoom in and out on the component here. Here I'll resize the window, and it's reacting responsively to the different sizes that we want to display it at. If I click this button over here, what I'm going to do is actually spawn a separate OpenFin application. And here it's showing a gauge with the, it's again bound to the CPU level of all the OpenFin windows that are open on the system. Here I'll open up another one. And we can see it's starting to make the CPU rise a little bit. And again, this is sort of the power of doing some high-performance rendering in the HTML5 canvas. This sort of thing wouldn't really have been possible before the in a web application before the advent of the HTML5 canvas API. So yeah, and all of the data visualization components in our product use the Canvas API to do all of their rendering. So let me open up another interesting demo here. So I have this window open here, and actually, you know what? Let me do this in another order. Okay, so I'm going to open up this application first, and then I am going to spawn this application. Okay, so what you'll notice is that I can actually close this window, and because this is a separate OpenFin application that we spawned with that button, it is not closed when we close the main window. And we'll just open up this Excel document over here, and essentially let's try an interesting trick here. So if I do a choose file over here and open that Excel document that I have over here, what you'll see is kind of an interesting thing. So we've been able to display the exact same Excel document over here in the Infragistics Ignite grid, and essentially what this did was to use our, this is still an OpenFin application over here. So what it did is to use our Infragistics Ignite API, Excel API that we provide with the Ignite product to parse the Excel document and then display it using our data grid component. Now, if I were to say reload this page here, we can get back to these buttons, and let's tile it over here. And so I'm going to instead open it as a chart. And what that has done is to use the Excel API to parse that Excel document and then feed that data directly into a component that we have called a category chart. And what it actually does is to look at the shape of the data and infer what kind of chart that you might want displayed. So in this case, it decided that maybe your this product column here represents the categories that you want to display the data across, and then you want to have a separate series for the Q1 through Q4 values plotted along those categories. Now what I can do is open up the same Excel document in the WPF app, and what we can do is essentially it's read the same data here and inferred the same shape of the data and displayed the same chart. This is our WPF version of the category chart, which has a very similar API and has the same behaviors as the JavaScript version of the category chart. And so we're able to get this parity between the two scenarios in these different windows. Now, an interesting thing that we can do here is we can jump over and start editing the data in this Excel file. And because the WPF app is watching for changes in the Excel file, when I hit save, what you'll see is that it animated the changes that I saved in the Excel document. But what you might have also noticed is that the values in the OpenFin application using the JavaScript version of the chart also animated their changes. Let's do that again, just so that you can watch it happen in both. I'm going to make a bunch of edits to the values here, and then I'm going to click the Save button, and you can see all of the values animate in concert. Now, that's not the only trick we have up our sleeves here. Also, I'm going to use the mouse wheel to zoom in a bit on this top chart here, and what you can see is that it's synchronizing the zoom position and also the pan position with the bottom chart. I'm going to use my fingers to do the same zoom and do pan around a bit. I'll do the same on the bottom chart. I'll do a bit of an inertial fling, and what you can see is that the zoom has stayed in sync between the two. So it's a pretty neat trick that's essentially managed by the fact that both of these components have pretty much the same API, and so it's just a matter of using the OpenFin inter-application bus to synchronize some of these events between the components. So, for example, when this chart says that its zoom has changed, its zoom position has changed, we can just synchronize that zoom position with the chart in the other application. Now, if we take a little bit of a look at how that's done, if I search for publish here, then what we can see is that when we are seeing the actual window change on the chart, we're able to publish this as a Excel chart zoomed event on the inter-application bus, and just provide information about the current window of the chart. And over in the WPF application, as a counterpoint here, what we can do is look for subscribe, and when we see a Excel chart zoomed message, then we can essentially update the chart's window with the values that we're receiving on the message on the bus. So let's see what else we can do here. So, all right. Now, the other interesting thing might be that so one of the ideas of OpenFin is to give you this local communication channel so that all of your different windows, whether they be traditional desktop applications or OpenFin hosted web applications, give you a communication channel so that all of these can communicate with each other. But what if I have some other requirements where maybe I've got a device sitting on my desk, or I want to walk around the building with a device, and I want it to be synchronized with the same information? Well, what we can do is start up an Android emulator here. So this will simulate a device sitting on my desk, or something that I've carried around the building, or potentially remote. And let's just throw that down in the corner here. Okay, and now that that's started, what we can do is go and start up a Xamarin app. And Xamarin is a technology that lets you use C# to build mobile applications in Android and iOS. And the idea here is to build an application that will, let's just try that one more time. Build an application that will essentially allow us to connect to the WPF app that we're running, and using a technology called SignalR, which allows us to set up a publish-subscribe bus, and essentially link in the publish-subscribe bus that we'll be listening into on this Xamarin application with the OpenFin publish-subscribe bus. So what we can do here is, now that this app is running, what I will do is to make another change to this Excel document, and what you can see is now the exact same chart is loaded in the Xamarin application as well. And what we can do is let's make a bunch more changes to the data, and we'll save it. And the changes will play here, and then the changes will actually also play down in the emulator. You'll have to trust me that it looks a lot better than that on an actual device. I think the emulator is running rather slowly with the Camtasia recording that I'm doing at the moment. Also, what we'll find is if I zoom in to show a certain portion of the data, that's also synced with the Xamarin application. Again, you'll have to trust me that that's a lot smoother when you've got an actual device involved. It's running a little bit slowly with the recording going on, but when I've been running it on my actual device, it's been very smooth. But yeah, that's sort of an example of how we've got the OpenFin application bus for talking between various OpenFin windows, and to extend that idea and target some other interesting scenarios, we can use other publish-subscribe technologies such as SignalR or WebSockets, Socket.io, to extend the reach of the OpenFin bus outside of the local machine. Of course, where there's a lot of power in OpenFin is the fact that it does operate on your local machine, and so it's got high-frequency updates, and it's secure and all kept on your local hardware. But yes, when you're trying to target some other scenarios where you need a bit more reach, then there exists other technologies that can assist you. And here we're aided by the fact that, yet again, we have the same component with very similar API available for Xamarin Forms, and so you can run this app on both Android devices and iOS devices. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little tour through how you can use OpenFin to interact with our user interface components to achieve various interesting effects. And yeah, hopefully you've found this inspiring in some way. I know it's been pretty interesting to put together. Thank you.